During hot and sunny days in January, June, and July, adult specimens larger than 2,000 grams generally rest on rocks emerging from the rapids and cascades, thus exposing their backs to the sun and to the continuous water splashes which keep their skin moist. They remain exposed for periods of about 35 minutes, then return to the water for 15 minutes. These are the words of the great Dr. Jordi Sabater-Pai from his book Contribution to the Biology of the Giant Frog, Conrau Goliath Bollinger. It seems he had been watching over a Goliath frog, or perhaps multiple Goliath frogs, over the span of about 1 day, maybe longer. No exaggeration, Dr. Sabater-Pai is like the whole reason why we have all of this information on the Goliath frogs. Like, the fact that he wrote a whole book on them is already pretty crazy because most animals only get like a chapter, or at some points only a footnote in some herpetological journals. So thank you to Dr. Sabater-Pai for his wonderful contribution to basically every aspect of the Goliath frog. So one thing you can glean from the opening quote is that Goliath frogs, much like their cousins, the American and African bullfrog species, they are quite sedentary. And like a majority of the day they spend only with their head above the surface of the water. And it's no coincidence that this is the exact same sedentary lifestyle that all frogs that hold the mantle of some of the largest frogs of all time have such a similar lifestyle. It's because it's to conserve energy, but we'll get into that later. But the Goliath frog is in fact the largest frog ever recorded. So large, in fact, that they hold the Guinness World Record for largest frog. Well, they don't hold it. I guess the guy that first caught them is the holder of it, which makes sense because where would the frog hang up the trophy? I guess since they don't really have like a whole house, they don't really have a trophy rack, but that's besides the point. Either way, it's not like everyone's competing for this specific trophy because being one of the largest frog species definitely has its downsides. For one, the reason they're so sedentary is because of the need for energy preservation, like we previously mentioned. The larger the body, the more energy it takes for said body to maintain itself, to pump blood, to breathe, run, swim, eat, all of it. This goes for the other two frogs I mentioned. Generally, nature just doesn't like making big animals because it's not energy efficient. Oh, especially when you keep in mind the Goliath frog's diet. And we do have percentages. That's right, we can make a whole ass food pyramid of what the Goliath frog eats. So at the very top, we have 10% indeterminate. So basically any debris that the frog accidentally swallowed. So rocks, twigs, leaves, you get it. The row under it, we got 10% amphibians, both adults and larvae of two bufo species. Then 20% crustaceans, we got some shrimp and crabs from the local rivers, very cool. And then 60% arthropods. We got roundback millipedes, scorpions, katydids, fly larvae, dragonflies. And that's an insanely varied diet, especially for a frog, who usually frogs are primarily insectivorous, only defaulting to a handful of species in their local areas. But it makes sense. I mean, that's one of the biggest perks of being such a big frog. Yeah, it's a trade-off for sure. You need to eat more to maintain your energy, but you can also eat a wider variety of stuff because more stuff fits in your mouth. It's also really awesome that we have such precise percentages. It would have definitely been harder to get a good look at what they were eating if they weren't so big and it didn't take them as long to digest. Because of the fact that they're cold-blooded, that's actually a big reason why they spend a majority of their day basking in the sunlight. It helps speed up their metabolism and aids with digestion. In fact, species that have less access to the sunlight are actually more likely to risk compaction during the digestion process because of the fact that a lack of sunlight means they have to slow down their body in order to deal with the cold. So, as you can imagine, the Goliath frog does a lot of basking, since they already do a lot of eating, because, of course, how else are they going to maintain their body weight? Despite this, daylight hours actually don't serve as the best time to hunt for Goliath frogs for the locals. Specifically, the locals of Cameroon and Equatorial Guinea, in settlements surrounding the basins Sanaga, Mubam, Nyong, Lokonje, Kienke, Ntem, Mbia, Benito, and Lanya. The Mbio Basin being where our favorite, Dr. Sabater-Pai, conducted most of his studies. What's important to note about all of these different settlement areas is the major role that they play in the population numbers of the Goliath frog. Of course, also being known as the giant slippery frog, the Goliath bullfrog, and Conrau Goliath, which is their scientific name. Now, I'm not sure if there's like a specific nomenclature for the Goliath frog that the local peoples of Equatorial Guinea and Cameroon have for the frog. If there is, we don't have any documentation of it. Let me know if you are aware of this. In the cuisine of both West African countries, the Goliath frog actually serves as a very important aspect. I've had frog legs before. They're very good. I mean, they're kind of the perfect meat for slow cooking just because of the high density of muscles in the legs, since, you know, you need more muscular legs for hopping. Now, as much as I understand how a Goliath frog, which is something with just so much high quality meat on their bones, serves to be an ideal scenario for the culinarily inclined, I must reiterate, the hunting for this species is like insanely detrimental to their population numbers. Okay, it's not just the hunting. It's the hunting, as well as the fact that it's very customary to dump local waste directly into the spawning ground for Goliath frogs, as well as the large amount of exporting that happens of the Goliath frog out of Equatorial Guinea and Cameroon, specifically exporting into the United States for the American pet trade. Because of course. Now, all of these aspects together make for kind of a nightmare scenario if you yourself are the Goliath frog, especially if you're native to Cameroon, because that is where a majority of the exporting takes place, likely because of more lax exporting laws. I'm not sure if there are any documentation on the numbers of exporting in Equatorial Guinea, but in Cameroon alone, it's estimated that around 300 Goliath frogs are smuggled out of the country for the pet trade. 300. Which is pretty bad, and that number alone would hurt the populations in no time. And although that number alone would hurt the populations of basically any native species with similar predicaments going on, that's not it. The fact that the places that they are native to have such an emphasis on agricultural sites means that they also have quite a bit of exposure to pesticides, which definitely does not help. Now, I'm not 100% sure if this is in response to or just coincidentally taking place beside the large amount of pollution that happens in their egg-laying sites, but there is something interesting that happens in said egg-laying sites. Currently, we know there are 3 types of nests that these frogs construct. Yes, construct. Keep in mind, all of these nests are created overnight, within just one night, verified by the fact that researchers surveilled the same area for several days. The first type is the most rudimentary, being a deep depression in the mud. The Goliath frogs will dig out a hole and then a shallow valley leading to a river directly next to their formation. This nest isn't so much a nest as it is a work in progress. These depressions were never filled with eggs and were always seemingly abandoned. Now that's type 1. Type 2 is the most common, where frogs will settle into an already existing gap in sediments and rocks, one where river water can reach inside. And the Goliath frog will enlarge it, deepen it, and use this as a nest. In some cases, they'll even turn rocks the size of their entire body upside down to further define the walls of their nest. Type 3 is the most interesting, at least to me. Goliath frogs will bring rocks and sediments, big and small, in a circular formation with several layers of rocks or gravel keeping the water inside, but also on the floor of the pool, almost like a gravel bowl. So not only were rocks gathered for this, but they were strategically placed for, get this, water filtration. Filtration is most definitely one of the key reasons as to why they're doing this. Now, one thing all of these nests have in common is the fact that the water is always cleaned by the Goliath frog during the nest formation. We're not sure how, but any foliage, dead leaves, twigs, any sort of natural debris that was there previously on the day before is cleared out by the time the nest is completed. All of that detritus and whatnot is typically dumped in sometimes a hole directly next to the nest itself. The water filtration thing specifically is interesting because the gaps in the rocks themselves are so small that any thick stuff from the water that's thicker than water is blocked by the small cracks in the rocks. In addition to water filtration systems, another big reason why they have such small gaps in between the rocks is likely to prevent any sort of river native predating species from getting into the nests, breaking in and actively predating upon the Goliath frog tadpoles, specifically the shrimp species Caradina ivae. In response to this, Goliath frog tadpoles swim in schools away from the shrimp anytime they do manage to make their way into the nests, which is more common with nest type 2 because the second type of nest has larger crevices that the shrimp can actively fit through. In addition to the construction of the nest, the adult Goliath frogs, mostly the males, are actively protective of their eggs. So much so that they will spend a majority of the day and night sitting at either the foot or the direct middle of the nest for a majority of their day and night. The fact that it's mostly males, I say mostly because that's more common with bullfrogs specifically. African bullfrog males will sit inside of the nest. In the paper, Goliath frogs build nests for spawning. The reason for their gigantism, Marvin Schaefer writes, "The frog changed its position approximately every 30 to 90 minutes, sitting within the nest, on the edges of the nest, and sometimes up to 3 meters from the nest. During this entire period, a second, larger frog briefly approached as well, not triggering any notable reaction of the first frog." Now, I don't know about you, but this sounds to me like a female approaching a male during the male's guarding session. The most common type of sexual dimorphism you'll see in frogs is the males being smaller than the females. And when it comes to parental care, I know that bullfrog males will typically guard their own pools of tadpoles. Now, nothing that I've read so far suggests which sex builds the nest or is more likely to build the nest. But if I had to guess, perhaps the males build nests to impress the females, kind of like a bird of paradise rituals, except for architecture nerds. But think about it. This would explain why the pools themselves, even directly, even for several nights after the initial construction of the nests, are missing eggs for sometimes up to weeks. It's also interesting why they have different kinds of nests too, and why one, type 1, the least visually interesting one, always lacks eggs. The female is unimpressed, therefore will not deposit her eggs. The male builds the nest, the female visits, judges its structural merits, then if it's up to her standards, deposits eggs for the male to fertilize, and leaves to do this with other males the same night. The male then watches over the eggs he fertilized, protecting them every night, and occasionally, perhaps, the female will return to see how it's going. This is supported by the previously cited article, where they write, "The relatively small clutch and egg size in most nests compared to the frog's body size might indicate that females do not deposit all their eggs at once, but that several smaller clutches are placed in the same or different nest over a certain period." They don't deposit all their eggs in one place, you say? Well, I wonder where they do it then. I like this theory mostly because it paints quite the interesting picture of Goliath frogs' inner social lives and societal structures. But I also think it makes quite a bit of sense, evolutionarily. Unfortunately, though, it's hard to get good proof of how the whole ritual takes place, since anytime a researcher, or anyone for that matter, comes close to an unfinished nest, the frog hops away and never returns to that spot. Judging by how common poachers are in their local areas, they likely thought that the researchers themselves were just another set of poachers. And well, that assumption isn't exactly unfounded, judging by, it's not like the researchers always let the frogs go free after initially capturing them. I mean, how do you think we got exact percentages as to what the frog ate? Because it sure as hell wasn't through a questionnaire. But maybe a questionnaire would be a good idea. We should try that next time. Food for thought. Actually, here's something that kind of supports my theory on it specifically being the males that build the nests. Dr. Sabeter Pai wrote, "Adult specimens may be territorial. The areas of their hunting grounds in the rapid and cascade biotopes of Mabia River range between 20 and 40 square meters. We assume that these territories, or home ranges, are affected by the volume of the water in the river." Looking at other territorial species, like some dart frog species for instance, we can clue into the fact that when an amphibian is territorial, 90% of the time it's just the males who are territorial. With this in mind, we can infer that the male Goliath frogs are territorial, which is an especially easy inference to make when you consider that they literally built their home, or I guess nest. If they built their nest, of course they would be protective of it. That makes sense. The same goes with humans as well. But what's important about this note is, going back to the report of what I think to be the male who stood guarding the eggs, when the other frog approaches, there is no notable reaction of the first frog. That doesn't sound like a territorial animal, does it? It's almost as if they knew each other. But those nests, especially the type 3 nests, definitely caught the eye of any Goliath frog enjoyers that heard about it as a potential cause for their gigantism specifically. It's theorized that perhaps they're larger so that they can move larger stones. Now, it could be said that this is equating causation with correlation. There are a number of variables at play that could cause gigantism in a Goliath frog. We know that gigantism typically gives you quite the advantage when it comes to giving you a wider variety in your diet, and almost makes you at the top of the food chain, discounting humans as well as when they're babies. But perhaps both a varied diet and the construction of the nests could both be factors that caused the evolving of this gigantism in Goliath frogs. Or it could be neither. It could be a secret third thing that we haven't even considered. We won't know unless we ask them. But wait a second, they actually might be onto something on the nests being a reason for their gigantism. Because look at the other frog species that construct nests. African bullfrogs, gladiator frogs, Bornean giant river frogs. I get it now. The bigger they are, the more they can manipulate their environment. It all makes so much sense. But don't get it twisted. This should not be any grounds to conflate larger animal, meaning more intelligent, just because they're able to manipulate their environment easier. This is a very common fallacy that I see a lot of people making. Likely because it's easier to project your emotions onto something that's much bigger. Larger lizards, for instance, can be compared to dogs, elephants compared to people, etc. Although you can say, well, elephants are smarter than other animals because they can paint. Well, sure, they can. I mean, you're right about that. But keep in mind, elephants can paint. What's keeping a lizard from painting? It's not their intelligence, it's their range of motion. Even in lizards with prehensile tails, their level of articulation isn't comparable to that of an elephant's trunk. Not to mention the fact that it's in the back of their body rather than the front, so it'd be hard for them to see what they're doing. All this to say, although it's common in the largest frog species to see them engaging in advanced projects, constructing nests and such, that doesn't mean that they evolved any sort of superior intelligence compared to any other frog species. It just means that they physically are able to construct these nests. As a whole, Goliath frogs are exceptional in many different ways, from their interesting breeding practices to their construction of quite efficient nests to their impressive size. And although their populations aren't doing great, keep in mind the fact that there are many captive breeding populations already established. Although the trend of their wild population is on a steady decline, the fact that we have captive breeding projects currently going on means that potentially in the future, a few interested individuals could turn it around. But being able to recreate their wild conditions in captivity, having a large enough enclosure with flowing water where the frog could create his own nest away from predators and where the female could then lay the eggs inside and they could recreate the entire sort of courting process that they have in the wild, that'd be pretty awesome to do in captivity. But that will be all from me for today. Thank you to the Goliath frog and thank you for watching. Goodbye.